Hello, I hope everyone is doing great today. My name is Brandon Bentley, and the psychoeducational group that I chose to do is helping trauma victims for first responders. I have a passion for first responders because I'm a retired first responder myself that was diagnosed with cumulative PTSD and post-shooting trauma from a shooting that I was involved in at the sheriff's office. I've actually tried to commit suicide 3 separate times within a month after my shooting several years ago, and because of the help from my trauma counselor and Jesus Christ and my wife and daughter, I'm here today, and that is the only reason I'm here today. And that's the reason that I chose this doctorate program, is because I have a passion for these type of people, and I think that in order to help anyone, you have to have that passion for those people in order for them to help themselves. They have to be willing to help themselves in order for you to help them. So, helping trauma victims is for class EDCO 711. And, let's first discuss what is trauma. Trauma is defined as when an individual person is exposed to an actual event, terrorist attack, death, serious injury, or sexual violence. That's from the American Psychiatric Association. Trauma refers to experiences that cause intense physical, psychological stress reactions. Trauma results from an event series or events. It can be more than just one thing. The experience by an individual can be harmful or threatening. It's lasting adverse effects. So the things that these first responders see on a day-to-day basis, it sucks. I'm just going to put it like that. It sucks. So the group that I chose is for the first responders. So the examples of various types of traumas: rape, terrorist attacks, assaults, death and accidents, child abuse, spousal abuse. Trauma can be different from person to person, and each event may affect each person different. So, case in point, there is many people that I know that are first responders as police officers that's been involved in officer-involved shootings that's fared very well and came out on top of the shooting very well. One of the issues with mine is there was no trauma counseling that was available at the time of my shooting. So my department actually sent me to a marriage counselor, and after the first 30 minutes, she told me that, Brandon, I have no idea how to deal with trauma. There was no type of community group. There was no group within the sheriff's office, no group within the state of South Carolina that I could actually speak with, except for post-trauma resources, which is located in Columbia, South Carolina, where my initial trauma counselor was. And by the grace of God and having a friend that is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, I was able to find him. So the objectives of the session is going to be help the helpers. Everyone is helping us each and every day, these first responders, so we have to make sure that we help them help themselves. Allow them to feel what's going on. They need to understand the feelings they have and what they're feeling. It's a normal response to what's going on with them, and there's no need for them to be scared of that response, and for them to understand that it's okay to not be okay. One of the biggest things that I've been told as a retired police officer and as a professional is that, and even from my own standpoint, that I didn't care if someone didn't understand what I was saying. I just needed someone to sit there and listen to me, listen to what I was saying. And they didn't have to agree with me. They didn't have to understand where I was coming from or anything. I just needed someone to sit there and listen to what they were saying. Use the same terms that they use. That is a big deal when it comes to the first responder world. You have somebody that is not first responder, not a police officer, firefighter, paramedic, dispatch, nurse, doctor, anyone that's on the front lines. There are certain terms that we use that others have no clue what we're using it for or why we're using it. But make sure you use the same terms that they have. Last but not least, do not dismiss their experiences. Whatever, each experience from each person is different. Each experience is going to affect each person different, and it's okay for them to not understand what's going on with them. And they may even come up and say, oh, well, mine's not as bad as yours. Well, PTSD is PTSD. Trauma is trauma. It affects everyone different in different ways, with different values and everything. So you need to be able to grab onto that and understand that. Objectives for the session. Various studies have shown that these psychoeducational groups has shown a connection to helping people who are having issues. The Sharp 2004. Make sure that there's knowledge available for them to understand. So you want to make sure that you have the proper paperwork, proper knowledge on what's going on with them, so they understand that you understand what's going on with them. Coming back to allow them to feel what they're feeling and have a sense of belonging on what they're feeling, and allow them to understand that they are okay and it's okay not to be okay. Help them lessen the fears of trauma. Some professional counselors recommend EMDR, some recommend exposure therapy. The fear is going to be there. You have to get around the fear. That is one of the biggest things that is so hard to get around, is the fear of the trauma itself. For me personally, case in point, is that exposure therapy worked for me. I went back to the scene of my shooting 5 different times with my trauma counselor, and there's actually videos that I made to help with the state of South Carolina and the state of Colorado and the legislative task force for cumulative PTSD and post-shooting trauma and workers' comp, because in those 2 states, workers' comp was not, they did not recognize any type of mental injury unless there was a physical injury present. So we had to make sure to try to work around that. It made no sense that they were trying to say that there's no validation in a mental injury. And for me, for instance, they stated that state of South Carolina State Supreme Court stated that killing of another human being in the capacity of a police officer is not extraordinary and unusual. Well, I can tell you right now, there's not a police officer I know on the police force anywhere across the United States that actually wants to take a life, that actually wants to fire that weapon. And there are so many that goes all the way through to retirement without having to even draw their weapon or fire that weapon. But when it comes to the point that you have someone that is threatening the life of another one or threatening your life, you have to do what you have to do. So, lessen the fears of the trauma. It's very hard to do, but it can be done. Increase self-awareness. Let these men and women know that it is okay. It's okay for what they're feeling, and give them tools to be able to work through what they're feeling and for them to understand what they're feeling. It's not easy to do, but the self-awareness is there, and they need to understand that it's okay not to be okay. And I know it seems like that I keep repeating myself, but it's a circle. It is a circle on with PTSD and other issues when it comes to first responders, whether it be trauma, grief, or so on. And then help them set goals. It's no different than what you were taught in elementary school. Set the small goals. Set the goals that are attainable, that you can reach, that's easy to reach, because once you reach that goal, make another goal, and make another goal, and make another one, until it gets to the point where you set the goals so far apart and so high that you can reach it, because you know that you will not give up on what you're doing. one of the biggest things that I've always said firsthand is that it is okay to fall. Just fall forward. Don't fall backwards. Fall forward, pick yourself up, and just keep trying to move forward each and every day. So set those goals every day and don't give up on yourself or anyone else. So the group design is the frontline workers between the ages of 21 and 70. Any frontline worker, any first responder, anyone like that. Victims of trauma must have been exposed to a critical incident, a trauma-related incident, obviously for men and women, and again for first responders and frontline workers. Coping with trauma. So the group discussion continued. I would like to have 9 group sessions, at least 1 hour per week. Thursday afternoons, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. 10 to 15 people in the group, closed group. It meets at the local community building. One of the main things is make sure there's a sense of confidentiality. Make sure the proper paperwork is signed during these groups, closed groups. And just the biggest thing when it comes to first responders is making sure that they know that you're not going to share their information or what's going on, because that's one of the biggest catalysts throughout the United States with first responders. They don't want to say that something's wrong with them or something's bothering them because they're too scared, because the departments will come back on them. So just make sure that all that is done. Excuse me. There's 3 activities that I particularly agree with, that I like. One of them is the ball activity. Is have them pass the ball around while the music's playing, and when the music stops, whoever's holding that ball share whatever feelings that they are having right then and there about the trauma that they experienced. The next one is Guess Who? The Guess Who activity. It's actually pretty interesting, and I went through this myself. It's have a person in the group write down something about them, pass the papers along, and see if each one can determine who it is in the group. One of the other ones that I enjoyed doing was the musical feelings. Have chairs in a circle with sticky notes on the seat about various feelings, and when the music stops, pick a person who is in any chair and ask them to explain about what is on their note. This is a great icebreaker. It's a great way for these men and women to be able to talk about what's going on with them and not be judged. And the one thing that they need to understand is that everyone that is in the group is in the same situation that they're in. They're there for help, and they're there to be treated. The objectives of this group will learn trauma-related symptoms and understand and identify triggers. You need to be able to identify the triggers on what caused you to get to this situation. Understand the stages of grief. Have them understand 1 to 3 coping skills. Combat breathing to help them relax. So combat breathing is 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out, 3 breaths in, 3 breaths out, 2 breaths in, 2 breaths out, 1 breath in, and 1 breath out. And just relaxing on this. The group we'll be speaking about today is the psychoeducational group therapy. People with the same issues can all join in a group and share thoughts. That's in Brown, 2004. Goals for the group. And this very important. Understand the trauma. Understand the trauma that you're dealing with. Understand the trauma that's affecting you. And second is how does it affect you? Grab on the way it affects you, and don't make it any less than what it is. And then the trauma response. Have trauma response to allow each and every one to understand what's going on with them and how they respond to their trauma. And allow each and every one to meet and have a small talk for them to get acquainted with each other at the beginning of every meeting. So you can have the first 5 minutes where you're just having everyone that's being acquainted with each other, and so they understand each other to a certain extent, because I promise you first responders are going to be able to read each other. And thank you so much for joining me with this video and my psychoeducational group design, and I hope each and every one of y'all has a blessed day. Thank you so much.